Hello and welcome to the very first episode of a new series called Tycoons. The idea of Tycoons is to show you the real people behind the empires, the real people behind the legends. My very first guest is a man who's frequently described as the world's richest Indian, as the 8th richest man in the world. But if I know LN Mittal, these are not descriptions he's proud of. He tends to see himself as a man who created value, as a man who came from virtually nowhere, who went to the world, and he proved that Indians could do it. Ellen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for agreeing. And we are talking in the midst of what is probably the worst recession the world has ever seen since the Great Depression. I know it's affected the steel industry. It's affected virtually everybody I can think of. Did you see it coming?
We got some sense. Fortunately, or incidentally, we were in Delhi for our management conference, where we had more than top 700 executives assembled here for 4 days. And during the conference, we realized that recession is coming.
What made you do that? What gave you that sense?
It is the experience and the knowledge of all over the world, and people were gathered here from 60 countries, and they could feel that something was not going right, and that made us to think really deep and take another view of the situation. While that quarter, which ended in September, we had one of the highest profit margins. Right. We had one of the highest business.
We're talking about September last year.
September last year, September 2008, and that was amazing. And while listening from the people, that made us to think differently. And when we really looked deeper, we also felt that things were not right, and recession or some weakness is coming into the market. So, incidentally, we were the first steel company who announced major production cut, who announced that things are not looking good, and everyone was shocked.
When did you announce this?
We announced this in October.
Oh, really? When people were still quite optimistic that this was just a temporary blip?
Yes, people were quite optimistic, and even some people were hoping that even if it is a weakness, it was a short-lived weakness. Yeah. And mind you, our conference was a growth conference where we wanted to gear up ourselves for an expansion plan. Yeah. ArcelorMittal itself was preparing to become a 120 to 150 million ton companies. That was one of our objectives, and India was our focus.
Right.
We had Finance Minister Chidambaram came and spoke in this conference, and our people were so excited and enthusiastic about prospects in India. So when the conference ended, we realized that we have to go back and do our homework again to see what is the immediate crisis. And come Lehman Brothers debacle, and
when Lehman Brothers must have happened immediately after your conference.
Yes, it was Sunday, and since I'm in the board of Goldman Sachs, and that Sunday we had our board meeting, I remember, and when I came to know that Lehman Brothers would be filing for bankruptcy the following day, it was very clear that things are not going to be ugly.
There was also that sense that this might happen to the banking sector, the financial sector, but the real economy will not be hurt. You never believed that?
Everyone felt that it is only a financial crisis, but we never realized that this financial crisis was much more deeper than only remaining as a financial crisis. It really became a global crisis. We have seen so many crises in the past. We have seen sectoral crises. We have seen the steel crisis, we have seen the IT boom and bust, we can see the different oil crisis, but we have never seen a global crisis, and it was like a tsunami.
You're a director of Goldman Sachs. You're one of the world's most successful international businessmen. Why didn't you guys see it coming?
It was quite a surprise. I think, first of all, I think the confidence, which is very important. And Lehman Brothers bankruptcy shook the confidence of the people. And my personal belief is that since people lost confidence in the economy, people lost confidence in the financial sectors, everything went back.
Many people say that was the domino that brought them all down. If somebody had allowed Lehman Brothers, the US government had, say, bailed out Lehman Brothers, confidence would not have been lost and the crisis could have been averted. Do you believe that?
I think that the crisis could not have been averted. There would have been a crisis. Maybe it would have been a much softer than what we have seen, or it could have come little later.
But you think it was going to come?
It was going to come because things had really gone very far.
Do you think you drowned so much in this flood of money that you guys never had the sense to put your heads above and see what was coming?
I think ArcelorMittal was very careful.
Okay.
I am very happy the way we have operated since the merger. Whatever growth plan we had, we never borrowed any money for the growth plan.
You didn't?
Yeah. All the growth and acquisitions since the merger was done out of our own income and own revenue. So that is a good thing we did as a company. Whatever debt is in the company, it was only at the time of ArcelorMittal merger. So that in that way, I think ArcelorMittal managed its business very well and in a prudent way. And at the same time,
the obvious question: if you knew this was coming, would you have fought for Arcelor quite the way you did?
I think ArcelorMittal merger is one of the best thing for the steel industry and for us, of course.
Explain that. Explain that.
Because this merger of number 1 and number 2 companies really created a major move in the consolidation of the steel industry. There is no other such consolidation would have happened in the steel industry. And I am very happy.
And the steel industry is quite fragmented, right? Is it still true that the top 5 do account for only something like 25% of global production, right?
Which is true. Yeah. The top 5 accounts a very small percentage of the total production. But a company like ArcelorMittal, who is so diversified geographically and who is so diversified product-wise, creates a very different example and leadership for the entire industry.
So you're therefore, because I want to ask you this because people say, well, the Tatas, for instance, that they shouldn't have taken over Chorus, they didn't realize what was happening. So if we were to ask you the same question about ArcelorMittal, there's no doubt in your mind that the merger made sense and perhaps even more sense given what's happening now.
Absolutely. This merger made the most sense. And if I have to think a situation or I have to visualize a situation that if there was no merger between ArcelorMittal and there were no other mergers and acquisitions which followed our mergers, I think the steel industry would have been a much worse shape than what it is. In fact, our merger led so many other consolidation. Tata has moved in Chorus. Yeah. A lot of other mergers happen in America. So this has consolidated the steel industry and this has helped the industry to survive well in this environment. Today, look, global basis, outside China and India, the steel industry is operating at 50% of its capacity.
Right.
And this is a very low capacity in such a heavy capital intensive industry. Operating at 50% is a very low capacity utilization.
Sure.
Couple of things I like to tell you. One, that in last recession or downturn of the steel industry was operating at 75% capacity.
Really? So this is that much worse?
Yeah. In this situation, operating at 50% of capacity, things are much better. Much better. It is not that the industry is bleeding as bad as it was in the last recession.
So you think the consolidation has actually helped?
I think the consolidation has helped. At the same time, the steel industry has become stronger. Financially, their balance sheets are stronger than ever. And the managements are excellent managements now managing the steel companies. They are not volume centric, they are profit centric. What ArcelorMittal has done, I can tell you that since this crisis started, we promised our shareholders we will reduce our debt by $10 billion.
Can you do that?
And we have already done it.
Already? How?
We have reduced our working capital requirements, we have raised some equities. We promised our shareholders that by December 2009, we would reduce our debt by $10 billion from September 08. And based on today's numbers, we have already reduced our debt by $10 billion.
There are two things people have said about you generally in conversation. The first is that LN spent too much time concentrating on Europe, concentrating on America. He should have spent more time on emerging economies. The second is that, the share price has fallen, billions have been wiped off, that he's facing the biggest crisis of his career. I want to talk about both of those things, but I want to do that after the break. Don't go away.